facilities review. And the floor is yours.
Kia ora koutou. It's great to be here to give you a briefing on the consultation of Te Awe Māpara and the changes that we've made to the plan before we come to you on the 23rd of November. So I will be flipping in and out of wearing glasses as well. So to start with, we just want to do to recap some background and the challenges and the key approaches to this plan. We'll give you an overview of the timeline and what we heard from the consultation and the changes that we're making to the plan and the actions, and then we'll just go over a bit of implementation and the financial implications of the plan. So, to start with this background to remind us of the journey, why did we develop this plan? So we have a lot of community buildings all over our city, and we didn't have a good understanding of them and how well they were meeting the needs and aspirations of all people in our community. We didn't have any consistent strategy that guided decision making about our facilities, and therefore we were making ad hoc decisions that weren't based on clear evidence and didn't align to clear objectives, and they weren't considering all potential responses. So as an example, we tended to go straight to a building solution when maybe other options like programming, operating hours, marketing, staff or resources may have been a more effective response. We knew that our facilities were ageing and the condition was deteriorating, and we didn't know how fit for purpose our facilities were. As a direction from the spatial plan, we know that our city is growing and changing. We wanted to understand what was needed in our facilities for those future needs. And the long-term plan, the 2021 long-term plan, called for provision of fit for purpose and resilient community spaces.
So just a recap of the challenges. So this plan started as a plan for growth, about having the right facility in the right place at the right time. We completed the citywide needs analysis across the 7 facility types and identified a number of challenges. The first one is Wellington has substantial provision, but many of these facilities are small, they're standalone, they're ageing, and they're not fit for purpose. And as a consequence of this, they're not catering for all of the community needs and aspirations. We've got an uneven distribution across the city, which has resulted in some overlaps and a few gaps. There is limited collaboration between community facilities, although there's a really strong interest, but an indication that there's a lack of people capacity. Some facilities are not well used, and others we don't understand the use because the data is just not there. We know that the facilities are costing more each year, and the current budgets have little planned for the future. Many of the buildings are not resilient or accessible and are not meeting Council's strategic goals. However, Wellingtonians are highly engaged and value their community facilities, and what we heard through all the consultation and the analysis is there is a desire for better quality facilities and a greater range of activities. So the key conclusion is Wellington needs better facilities, not more. So this plan is about a process. It's setting a new approach for the future. And that is based on having a comprehensive process and bringing the community along with us to complete robust investigations whenever we're contemplating any facility change. It's about being smarter so that we maximise the benefits of our facilities, making sure that we consider all types of options. It's about making informed decisions so that there's a clear line of sight between any investment we make and the outcomes we're expecting. It's about being proactive and exploring different ways of doing things, looking for the innovation by working together and using the collective value of our facilities. It's about being holistic and collaborative across the city, getting the most out of what we have. We know that more investment is going to be required if we want to provide better facilities to meet community needs. If we follow the approach set out in the plan, this will deliver value for the community and the city.
Nō ko te hea. I forgot to introduce ourselves. Ko Christine Tokuingwa, I'm Policy Advisor here at Council, but you probably remember us, don't you? And ko Anita Onaingwa, who is a lead consultant with Visitor Solutions that's helping us with this plan. So the timeline to date, it started back in March 2022 with the wānanga with Taranaki Whānui, which set the direction for this plan. We then developed a project plan, and then from June to December, we conducted our needs analysis, which was a really thorough and robust needs analysis that informed the direction of the plan. We carried out 5 different surveys and heard from over almost 6,000 people. We carried out condition and fit-for-purpose assessments on all our facilities. We looked at how well our facilities were meeting the Council's strategic goals. We also carried out catchment analysis of our facilities and assessed utilisation and usage. And we presented that needs analysis summary to you in March. And then we brought the draft plan to committee for approval to consult on the 28th of June, and then we consulted from the 30th of June to the 7th of August. You heard from the oral submissions, the 28 orals on the 31st of August, and then we're presented with a public petition on the 12th of October for a public toilet. We've been reviewing that feedback and making changes to the final plan, which we'll present to you on the 23rd of November for approval to adopt, hopefully. So the public consultation was for a 5-week period. We had 236 written submissions, and you heard from 28 oral submitters. There was generally really good support for the plan. Of note, there were 32% of submissions were from Kandala residents and 6% were from Ngaio. There was a front page article in the Independent Herald on the 20th of July titled "Closure Threatened," and that likely affected who we heard from and the content of the submissions. So the themes from the public consultation, there was a wide range of views, generally really good, strong support for the direction of their plan, the approach we were taking, and the need for Council to be proactively planning for our facilities. One of the biggest themes was around the importance to engage with our community and partner with our community when making significant facility decisions. Accessibility and the relative importance to different people was another theme. We heard that the wording, length and detail of the plan did not provide the clarity that some people were after. They wanted to know what it is that Council was actually going to do. Another really important theme was how important facilities are for the sense of community and well-being. A number of people highlighted the tension between local provision of facilities and our transport goals and ensuring that our facilities are well utilised. There was concern about the impact of closing facilities on communities. With the Kandala submissions, there were 3 sort of main themes that came through, which were do not close, and then support for the individual Kandala facilities, and then there was also a theme around the approach and terminology used in the plan was an excuse to close facilities. So, for example, the word cohesive was thought to mean closing local facilities, and investing strategically was investing in larger hub-like facilities. There were different views on what was important for facilities. So for some people, it was about the environment, to economic, community impact, accessibility, and social inclusion, etc. There was a theme around the capacity of staff and volunteers to implement any changes. There were a number of requests for new public toilets, and there weren't very many requests for new facilities though, but we did receive a lot of specific feedback regarding facilities and programs which have been passed on to the operational teams. So the mission and outcomes section, there was really good support for the mission and the 5 outcomes, ranging from about 84 to 93%. So as a result, this section remains largely unchanged. The mission statement is exactly the same. We still have the 5 outcomes. We've just slightly tightened up the wording due to those requests around wording changes and being more specific, and then we've updated the new city vision and the 5 approaches of the council's new strategic direction. So are there any pārtai at this stage? Will she carry on?
I think let's carry on and
Yeah, I've got a few.
a bit in advance.
Yeah, I actually have got a few questions, but I'm happy to leave it, especially with some of the comments that have been made so far. Thank you.
Good. What we do is if you finish, Kristen, and we can do the question.
Questions at the end. Okay. So in response to the feedback asking what it is that council's actually going to do, we've done that table, I think it was table 2.4 in the draft plan, which was the strategic alignment table, and we've replaced it with this table, which is how Te Awa Māpara contributes to council's outcomes. So with each of the outcomes, each of the 5 outcomes, we've shown how they align to the citywide outcomes and the Tupaki Order waypoints, and then what we'll see at the facilities by focusing on each outcome. So for example, with Manaakitanga, we're going to see more accessible facilities, more inclusive facilities, and we'll be addressing equity and provision. And so we have one of these tables for each outcome.
As articulated previously, Te Awa Māpara is about defining a new approach for the future. So as a result of the feedback we received in the consultation, this section has been reworked, and the aim is to provide greater clarity about what the council is going to do into the future. So this section does look substantially different to what was in the draft plan, but there is a lot of similar content to the draft plan. At its core, in the centre of the diagram, the future approach is about carefully evolving, being smarter, and maximising the benefits of our community facilities to deliver the mission and the outcomes. Around that core approach is 5 integrated methods that we will that are proposed to be applied as part of our future approach. So starting in the blue, the community partnerships. So this is about reflecting the feedback around the need to work with the community in a partnership approach to understand the needs, to consider options, to inform decision making, and also to form partnerships in the provision of community facilities. Using a consistent approach and a robust process to investigate the needs, to test options, to inform evidence-based decisions. So this includes the prioritisation criteria that to consider the alignment of any investment decisions back to the outcomes. The collaboration methods outline a range of delivery methods and provision models to support greater collaboration in the facilities. The fit-for-purpose principles outline a range of considerations to be applied to the maintenance, to renewals, to development of facilities, to ensure the facilities are usable for our diverse needs and are easy to operate. And then the improving delivery, this is about trying to maximise those benefits and get the most out of what we have, and in response to the public consultation and the community aspirations. So these are things like defining the usage targets, which we've previously discussed with the councillors, reviewing opening hours and those sorts of things, so the way that we're delivering the facilities. So the actions have been reformatted into 3 sections. So there are 14 delivery investigation actions. So these are the ones focused on how we can improve the delivery, investigating the facility provision and projects underway. The timing of the actions is aligned to the LTP. So very short being 1 to 3 years, short being 4 to 6, medium being 7 to 10, and so on and so forth. We have made a number of editorial changes to the actions, and this is really to provide some of that evidence that some of the submitters were wanting to see, but carefully balancing that with not wanting to make the plan too long and too wordy, because there's a lot of evidence that supports some of those actions. So some of the key changes that we have made to the actions. So the Western Onslow cluster of community facilities, this has been brought forward to very short, and the Northland component of the action has been separated. The rationale for that change is the Council's previous decision to divest the Wadestown Community Centre, and we need to consider what is the appropriate response to that closure. We know that there is a functional relationship between community centres and libraries, and the catchment analysis shows us that there is a geographic relationship between Wadestown to Ngaio to Kandala. So if we're contemplating some change in that cluster of facilities, whatever happens at one facility is going to have an interrelationship to the others, and that's why we want to consider those together. The Johnsonville and Tawa actions, we did hear from a few submitters about wanting to see these as very short, but we have put those in the short term. And this is because there is an interrelationship, particularly between Johnsonville to that western cluster. So we need to understand the western cluster before we then do the investigation in the Johnsonville area. And likewise, there is an interrelationship between Johnsonville and Tawa. So we want to make sure that these interrelationship between the facilities are considered in the investigations. The Newtown action has been brought forward to very short, and we've brought in the Owen Street site and the Karara Park public toilet. And that is because there's a number of issues across a number of different facilities in Newtown, and there is that interrelationship between the facilities, but it's also responding to the current work program around the Owen Street and that public petition for the public toilet in Karara Park. The Kilburnie actions for the community centre, the recreation centre and the park development plan, they've been brought all together, and that's in light of the scope of the development plan that is in progress, but again also to consider those interrelationships between those facilities. The Granada North and Granada Village actions, now these have been separated into two actions. We heard from submitters that the timing and likelihood of housing and roading development is quite uncertain, and that would impact the previously thought geographic connection between those two areas. So it is therefore appropriate for us to split those into two considerations, two separate investigations. The Central City community facilities, the Victoria Bowling Club and the Thistle Hall, we've brought those together as one combined action. Again, that's to consider the interrelationship, but also to recognise the role that the Central Library will play in meeting community facility needs into the future. We also did have a small number of submitters calling for a public toilet at Pyrie Street Playground. I kept on getting that word wrong. We've also added two new actions, and again in response to the consultation feedback, one around investigating the need for a changing places facility post the one that's under development, and then also for around hydrotherapy provision as well. So in terms of the implementation of the plan, so as I said, the plan provides the direction, the approach and the priorities. This will be incorporated into the asset and activity management plans, which set out the day-to-day delivery of facilities, the maintenance priorities and the work programs of the different business units. And they will then be undertaking those actions to investigate the delivery and the facility issues. Any financial implications of the actions or of the outcomes of those investigations will need to be considered through the annual plan or the long-term plan processes.
We've raced through, now we're on to our last slides. We'll have plenty of time for Pātai. So The indicative costs of undertaking the actions in the plan over the next 30 years are set out in this table. So in years 1 to 3, we'll be undertaking 13 actions, and that has an approximate cost of $820,000. And you'll see in those years 1 to 6, that's where we've got the heavy lifting part of the plan. There's quite a number of actions in that first period, and that's because they're the as you heard about in the action slide, they're the bigger sort of actions, those big significant ones like the tower and the Johnsonville and the central pools. So now, implementing any outcomes of the actions, and it's obviously really difficult for us to identify those costs because we first need to go work through the process set out in the plan, working with our community and completing the investigations to identify the appropriate response. So obviously it's really difficult for us to know what those costs are going to be until we've done that investigative work. Those investigations will have a much longer time frame, so you're likely to see them starting to be implemented from year 7 onwards, and that's due to the nature of the facility development and the work required to understand the appropriate response. I have no idea what that. Here we go. However, to inform the LTP infrastructure strategy, we do need to make some provisions for future investment, so indicatively up to $300 million over 30 years for implementation. And that brings us to the last slide. So, any partai?
Cool. What I will do is I got a question first, and then I will go to Councillor Panet online. And Ray, Sarah, did you, Councillor Free? Okay, we'll come back. So the first question to you, Kristen, is that you're bringing this paper on 23rd of November for decision. As you know, this week we'll be making a decision on long-term plan. How would that fit into that long-term plan since you are bringing the paper on the November 9?
Well, we are working really closely with the long-term plan team, but as you can see, we're indicatively providing for $300 million over the next 30 years to be put into that long-term plan, and they will be more likely in the 7 to 30 year time frame, but the 1 to 6 years will be those investigation costs you can see there. Does that?
So the question would be, is that a better way? Was it a bit of a miscommunication, or was it a better process making a decision on this paper and going back to the long-term plan instead of making a decision on long-term plan and then going back to the paper? Buzz is coming, I think.
Yep.
Morning, everyone. So this plan was actually designed and programmed to feed into the LTP. So early on, we recognised that we needed to have a comprehensive plan, investment plan into our community facilities, and so that's what's been prepared, and so that's currently programmed to feed into the LTP. So the timing is exactly as planned. We're not at a budgeting stage yet. We're talking about levels of service, we're talking about provision for the future, and so this plan has done a lot of detailed work to understand what the cost requirements of our facilities are going to be in terms of the long term, and so this is a point in time where you start considering that and putting that into the long-term plan. So the 9th, which is a couple of days away, that's an initial discussion around levels of service. From there we do budgeting, and then we start making draft decisions only in February with final decisions in June. So this is the right time for these kind of projects to feed into the long-term plan.
Okay, my second question is, you talked about Newtown action and investigating the Newtown. What is that one, Newtown on Owen Street? What is the what is that?
What are the issues?
Yeah, you say
Okay.
Newtown on Owen Street.
So there's a number of different issues going on. The first one is the library is quite small, and it's significantly small to cater for the future growth in that area. The adjacent building has got some serious building deficiencies, which mean we need to consider what's the future of the network, Newtown network, I can never remember which way around it goes, provision that's going on there. There is a number of facilities that are located on the town boat, which is quite close to Newtown. They've identified some building deficiencies as well. You've had the public toilet request at Karara Park. You've got, we've had feedback around the public toilet, which is right next door to the library, that there's some safety and concern issues and some quality issues around that one. You've got the Owen Street building, and then you've got a number of facilities that are kind of jotted around in Newtown, and how do we make those work cohesively together? So there's all of those issues that we need to kind of unpack and understand the community needs, understand community aspirations, look at different options around how we can make the most out of the existing facilities, whether any investment is required into the future.
Cool. Councillor Pennant, it's online.
Thank you, Nurin, and thanks, staff, for all your hard work on this. Looks good. So I've got two questions. One is, I presume there's no change to the urgency we're giving to the creation of rainbow space. Sorry, I can't hear anything.
Sorry, we're just
wait,
double checking.
Yep.
Oh, cool. Sorry. Sorry.
I don't
we
think
make an
there
amendment?
is. From memory, there isn't, but we can come back to you on that.
Yeah, because we moved it, Terry and I moved an amendment to make sure it was given top priority for giving, very fast action to get moving on it. So I just wanted to check on that. And then the other question I've got, really my concern is around equity. Obviously, we need to spend some money in the central city, but I want to make sure that all communities get something. So are there any communities that aren't going to have, over that 30 years, any investment?
So there's a number of different ways to look at that. So there's geographic, and I think all areas of the city have got a level of investigation over the 30 years. Secondly is functionally, and again, all types of facilities have got some level of investigation. And then there is the different kind of community groups, and we've put that equity lens over it in terms of different communities of interest in terms of their aspirations and expectations for community facilities. So can't say about the level of investment because that will be determined by the outcomes of those actions, but in terms of actions, yes, it's covered across what we would see as geographic and functional and communities of interest.
Yeah, the geographic is important because it needs to be close to where people live, So, yeah. Okay, I will look at that carefully. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Councillor Chang?
Great, thank you. I have a few questions. The first one is earlier on in the presentation, you talked about better facilities and not more. And yet, prior to that, you talked about there are gaps in our network of community centres. So how do you reconcile those two statements?
So their needs analysis identified that there are a few gaps, and that's mainly in the aquatic and in the recreation centre space. And we have got actions to investigate the provision of water space and also the provision of recreation space, and that's primarily in that kind of northern ward, western ward, kind of in that area. So again, there is. Those are the kind of the specific gaps that we've identified. However, I guess the thing we're saying is that this plan started out as thinking that we needed a whole lot of new facilities to cater for growth, and that's not the conclusion. It's about investing in some of our existing facilities to get better outcomes from them. Sometimes that may mean there is a new facility is better than continuing to invest in old. We don't know what the best solution is going to be. And that's why we're kind of saying it's investing in better facilities rather than lots and lots of new ones. Does that make sense?
Yep, that's great, thanks. I appreciate that. You're talking about a geographic liaison between Wadestown and Ngaio. I think that when you start looking at how the different suburbs actually align with each other and how they interact with each other, I'm not sure that some of these are actually exactly what people do. For example, you talk about Wadestown and Ngaio, you talk about Johnsonville and Tawa. I haven't noticed, and perhaps my colleagues here would be able to speak more on that, but I see that there's more of a link between Kandala and Johnsonville. So the people in Kandala would go to Johnsonville a lot more often to do their shopping because, of course, it's the larger town centre, and
Councillor
not
Chunk.
so much into Tawa. So there's that issue. I didn't understand what you meant by changing places and hydrotherapy. Okay, and shall I go through these one?
No, let her
Can I
answer.
do those two parts
Yep,
first?
okay.
So the catchment analysis that we did, and we'd be more than happy to show you the maps offline if you'd like, what it showed is that the Wadestown community, well, the Ngaio community facilities, so the Ngaio Town Hall and the Ngaio Library, they reach into Wadestown and they reach into Kandala. So that shows us that some people that live in Wadestown are going to those facilities in Ngaio, and maybe vice versa. And similarly, the catchments for Kandala, you're absolutely right, there is a relationship between Kandala and Johnsonville. However, we kind of had to draw the line somewhere in terms of that relationship, and there seemed to be a much stronger relationship between Kandala to Ngaio and then Ngaio to Wadestown in terms of those catchment overlaps. I think the thing is that we're not saying that one facility is serving those other areas. We're saying that there's an interrelationship between those facilities. So if you make a change to one, it's likely to have an impact on the others, and so we need to understand those. But also when we're talking about wanting to make better use out of all of our facilities, how can we get those facilities to work together? Do we need to kind of change the programming at one or change the hours at another? Those are all the things that would be considered in those investigations. So, that's the interrelationship between the two. In terms of the relationship between Johnsonville and Te Tawa, and that largely comes around the recreation centre gap, which is one of the big kind of driving forces in the Johnsonville action, because we've identified that gap. Whatever we do there is going to have a relationship to Nairnville Recreation Centre, and it's also going to have a relationship back up to the Tawa Recreation Centre, because the catchments for recreation centres are much bigger than the catchments for community centres and libraries. So, yeah, it's just drawing the line around how do we consider those interrelationships. The Johnsonville and the Tawa one are separate actions, but we're just timing them so that we can make sure that what we learn in one can feed into the other and vice versa going forward.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Chunk, I'll come back to you, okay?
Yep, okay.
Councillor Free.
I'll quickly answer the changing places. So basically these are a higher level of public toilet that cater for people with really severe accessibility needs, and so it enables those people that have really high needs to be able to get out into the community, but they're not limited by the facilities that they may be able to use as they go about. So there is one that is planned in the central city. We need to understand the use of that before we then consider whether there is need for any more. Hydrotherapy is warm water activity, so a lot of people, older people and people with disabilities, or people that have kind of got arthritis and things like that, they get into the really warm water and do gentle exercise, and it helps movement and it helps their health and well-being going forward. So there is a hydrotherapy pool at RAC, but given the much ageing population of Wellington, we see that there is probably going to be a need for more hydrotherapy provision going forward.
And we also heard from a number of submitters asking for a bit more focus on hydrotherapy provision throughout the plan. So that's why we've separated it out of F1, that first action around central pool provision, and we've made it its own separate action. So we look at hydrotherapy on its own.
We will come back to you, Councillor Young. Yeah,
thank you. I've actually got a few questions too. So the swimming pool provision that you said there were some gaps in it, was it just hydrotherapy? Because and you also said west and north, and yet we're talking about taking out Kandara pool, so I wanted to know how that
So
wraps
the
up.
west and north is in relation to the recreation centre gap, not aquatic.
Okay.
So for aquatic, it's not so much about geographic, it's about the functional provision. So what we identified is that there is an undersupply of leisure, hydrotherapy, and potentially learn to swim. It's a little bit difficult to fully assess the learn to swim because there are a number of private providers in the learn to swim market. We need to, again, work with them to understand what areas they're reaching and whether there are any communities that are missing out. And we know how important learn to swim is. That came out as the highest valued area of swimming pools. So it's not a geographic gap, it's more a functional gap. But the other aspect with water, with swimming pools, is that we have as the city grows, our pool space is probably going to come under pressure because of the number of people that we're trying to fit into pools. So if we continue to have a rectangle pool trying to do it all, that's going to become, an area of real concern for the community. So it's about having those different types of pools. If you think about Keith Spry, it's got some leisure space, it's got some teaching space, it's got some structured space, and it doesn't quite have the hydrotherapy.
Because I know how expensive swimming pools are, so would we be thinking about taking our existing pools and just doing different things within that?
I think you need to consider all those options. You need to look at, what would it cost to upgrade your existing facilities, and what would be the impact on operating costs, and what would be the impact on community outcomes. And you also probably need to consider, other types of provision in terms of partnerships, or whether a new facility is a better option. You do have some older facilities, and swimming pools are really challenging buildings, and they do come to the end of their life, so you need to consider that as part of that. But that's where that robust investigation provides you with the information to make a really well-informed decision.
This might be one for you to get back to us, Baz, but the swimming pools decarbonisation, what would be the savings and operational costs? Have we got any idea what the business case actually is for that? And I'm not expecting you to be necessarily able to answer it now, but...
I can't answer it at this point in time, but I'm happy to come back to you on that.
Thank you. And the other, one more quite quick one.
I'll come back to you quickly, Councillor Free. I gave you 3 questions, but
I haven't had 3 yet.
You had 3, actually.
I just wanted to ask about these figures.
I'll get back to you. I promise. We've got a few time. Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you for this. You're sort of one slide short, because I'm interested in the list of actions that you've now revised against the time frame. Is that able to be distributed to councillors? Oh, it's just sent to me. Oh, okay.
So this is the list of the very short and short-term actions. So you'll see there, Councillor Pannett, the rainbow spaces in the very short time frame.
Yes, so I do have a couple more.
Yep.
So some of these facilities are being actioned on the basis of predicted population growth along the Adelaide Road, mass transit corridor. If that changes, will that change your plan?
It's a great question. With the Newtown one, that is a consideration of the Newtown action, but I don't think they're going to change any. Whatever happens with Let's Get Wellington moving won't affect these actions, because these actions are investigative actions that looking at the whole environment before we consider potential responses. Have you got anything to add, Anita?
Yeah, I would just also add, in terms of the modelling and the catchment analysis modelling that we did and the growth projections, is it didn't, while we kind of factored into our thinking, the Let's Get Wellington movement. The actual impact on population wasn't in that modelling. So in terms of our future growth projections, it wasn't really, brought in as a major factor. I mean, the Newtown Library is still undersized for the catchment that it is serving and the indicative growth that is forecast by Sense Partners in terms of their growth projections. So, we did kind of know that could be an additional implication, but it wasn't the driving force.
Okay, well, coming from Johnsonville, I know what under-scoped, under-capacity library is about, and we've fixed that. That's great. Third question is, the biggest single deficiency you identified was the lack of indoor recreational space between, essentially north of Wadestown. Where is the action to investigate that?
That is, I'm just going to get the number right. F4, Recreation Centre Gap, Johnsonville Facility Provision.
So that's not, actually I'll go back on this. Thank you.
Cool. Councillor Calvert, did you want to ask any question? Cool. What we do is you can do 2 questions, and I also see you might want to comment on some of the comment they made. I think you leave that one.
I will ask questions.
Yeah, make it a question. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Okay, so that's
Not that it's going to make what I say any different. So did you, I noticed you referred to the Independent Herald article where, and I have to say that people, community are very concerned. Did you also note the article, which we've got our CEO on here? COO, sorry. We must extra zero.
We're thinking about a promotion.
Because I think it would probably be useful as well because of the student feedback as well. And, we do want to hear from young people because it's their facilities, the future. So have you taken that into consideration?
What date is that article?
I will see October the 26th.
Okay. No, we didn't because that was obviously outside of the consultation period,
yeah,
but we
have
will
a
have a look. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. That was one question. Where is the involvement with working with schools? Because in particular, one school in particular is Onslow College, and the facilities that they have there and the opportunities to partner with the community. So I'm interested to see where that is.
That's a great question. So remember at the beginning we talked about the future approach and we talked about partnering with the community. So that approach to partner with different organisations is right up there as an approach. In terms of the actual doing, we've got D6, which is in the very short term, and this is around trying to establish some facility partnerships. And it's not just with schools; it could be with the Ministry of Education, it could be with the tertiary institutes. Ministry of Health as well. So there's a number of different organisations that have identified they would be interested in working with council to explore different ways of responding to community needs through coming together on facilities. Picking up on the point before, we know that they're very expensive.
Okay. Yes.
Secondly, in terms of Onslow College specifically, we would see that being picked up with F4 in terms of that recreation centre gap and the Johnsonville facility provision. It could be an opportunity to explore a partnership there.
No, that's fine. Can we be specific about that? Because I think it's really important in the paper going forward, because you're very specific about some other facilities, and I think it would be really useful to note about Onslow College working with the Ministry of Education and the actual college. And
one more question.
Okay, what this other thing?
Oh, if you don't have, that's fine. I can go to.
Just when you talked about no, I've got learn to swim. Did you consider learn to swim is very broad? Did you consider about the availability of people learning to swim and furthering their skills in pools that aren't indoor? And so that they are subject to the weather a little bit more, not so that people can get used to swimming either in rivers or sea or whatever.
So in terms of the analysis, we looked at all of the places that are providing learn to swim opportunities at the moment. We are defining it as a learn to swim program as opposed to more casual kind of interaction with water where you do get learning outcomes. So that included some facilities that are outdoor operated or outdoor with a cover over the top of it. So yes, but in terms of defining what the right outcome there is, we are saying there's further investigation needed, particularly around working with those learn to swim providers, because you do have a number in Wellington that are delivering in that space, and that we need to understand what role they're playing, what role the public facilities are playing, and what role other amenities might be playing. We know that there's 2 private facilities as well.
Yes, but it comes back to outcomes as well.
Yep, thank you. And I'll come back to me and then Councillor Free. You said it's about 300 million for the 30 years, but from what I see in the first 10 years, it's about 2.2 million. Is that the right figure? Am I right in saying that?
Oh, so the first table, that's the cost of implementing the actions which are in the plan, and they are all investigations. So that's the OPEX cost of doing those investigations. That second part of the slide talking about implementing the outcomes of the actions. Until we do those investigations, we do not know what the cost of that is, because we do not know what the appropriate response is until we work with our community and complete those investigations. And so because we needed to have a placeholder in the LTP, we have that indicative figure of 300 million over the 30 years.
Let me get this right. The first 10 years, let's see this long-term plan, 2024 to 34.
Yeah.
How much do you have in CapEx and OPEX in total?
We'll need to come back to you on those exact figures. They're the OPEX there. How we've spread that 300 million out, that will be detailed in the paper, but would you prefer those figures before?
So for BAS would be how much is that reflected in the long-term plan?
Yeah, look, we can come back with the details. So the 300 million is capex. That's over 30 years, so it's about 10 million a year. And like Christine said, that's a placeholder. It might be more than that, might be less than that, and that largely depends on the investigative work that we do and the options that you choose to take as part of your decision-making process. The LTP only looks out 10 years, right? Which is why you've kind of got the OPEX figures in there. The CapEx figures, we have to do an infrastructure strategy and a financial strategy, and we actually have to look out longer than 10 years. For all those 2 strategies, we have to look at least 30 years into the distance. And so what we've done is we've given that $300 million figure at this point in time. That might change as you do your investigations. Might be less, might be more. So we can come back in terms of the phasing of that. We can potentially, I can talk to finance and provide a bit more detail as part of the paper when's the paper going out? Yep, okay, so we can do it as part of that.
Okay, so as of now, we have the OPEX, but we don't have the CapEx for the first 10 years in this paper, right?
So this paper, what's reflected in the LTP will be dependent on the decisions you make on the 23rd.
Okay, okay, I'll take it out. Councillor Free.
Maybe my question's a bit similar to Councillor Abdurrahman, but these figures here, the 820 for years 1 to 3 and the 710, are they actually already in our LTP as OPEX costs, or is this additional to the current LTP?
Yeah, so these numbers here that you see will go into the 2024 LTP.
Right, so we can assume that they'll be there?
Yes.
Okay. And the other thing I wanted to ask again about swimming pools is we've helped fund some school pools. So Wellington East, I think it was Kilburney School, Berrimpool Pool, Newtown Pool come to mind. How much consideration have we got in terms of how we can use How can we use those more effectively in partnership?
Yeah, so we fully took those facilities into account in terms of the analysis that we did around, particularly around the Learn to Swim provision, but then the Wellington Girls also provides a structured provision as well in terms of squads of swimming there and that going forward. So they're fully factored into the analysis. I think there is a lot more that we can get out of those. One of the things that we've identified through this plan is the need to have more closer engagement with those schools to understand the impact that those facilities are having, and so that we can understand the interrelationship, and that will help inform that, the need for the Learn to Swim. It could be that all of those facilities are providing for it, but we just don't have the data to be able to fully inform that. But it's definitely an option, and a partnership approach is one of the key things going forward. And, there are a few more school pools that are out there that potentially could be part of that response to the Learn to Swim provision into the future.
Various gaps in our Learn to Swim provision geographically?
Yep.
And what would they be?
So the geographic gaps that we identified provisionally, and I don't want to be hung to task on this one because, as I say, there is a few data gaps. One is the central city area that we just don't have much provision of Learn to Swim in the central city area. The other is in the sort of the eastern sort of Miramar, Strathmore kind of area. You could say, those people should be going to Wellington Regional Aquatic Centre, but in terms of the distance, it is quite a lot longer. And then the other gap potentially is sort of in that more southern area, sort of Island Bay kind of area as well.
Cool.
Thank you.
But I say provisional.
Thank you. That's very handy. What I will do is, Councillor Randall, you just make a quick question and then we need to wrap up soon.
Okay, so my question is really about the proposal for postponing or not getting onto the Johnsonville facility provision. Are you aware that Onslow College is in a building program, and going towards your partnership, are you aware they're in a building program and have provision for indoor rec space, but that provision needs to be exercised immediately? Because I've talked to officers about it, and I'm just surprised that you don't seem to be aware of the timing of when some education money will definitely be available.
So PSR have been working with Onslow College, and that work will inform this. But okay, and we'll. Do you have anything to add?
You can respond.
I guess the thing we'd say is that if there is an urgency around it, that might change the timing for that one. We are also being very conscious about trying not to front load too much. So I've been kind of like, anytime you bring one forward, you've got to push one back.
I understand that. I just want to, maybe we take this offline. I think we should take
that's
it offline.
better.
Thank you.
And last question. This one going to go into more a holistic level. When your team, the community facility team, ask for allocation of funding, how that happened? I mean, did you ask for more money to go into the CAPEX and OPEX in the next 10 years, and how that end up? I'm not asking what you do behind, an operational level, but do you think what you have is enough, or because of the financial circumstances, that's what you want to work with?
The investigative costs that are listed there, I think are pretty accurate up until probably year 10. And in terms of the CAPEX, as we say, it's probably going to be wrong because we are taking an educated guess on the outcomes of the investigations, and we don't know what they are until we do them. But that is a best guess based on a square meterage rate of how much it costs to build like facilities at this point of time.
Fana, what we do, we finish the time and we can take some of our questions offline. And thank you so much for answering the questions and such a good presentation as well. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.